Hey everyone, there are three things that tend to surprise people about my trailer. First of all is how big it feels on the inside compared to how big it looks from the outside. You step inside and it feels bigger than it should. Second one is how much equipment I've actually been able to stuff inside this thing. I've got equipment everywhere, so you walk in, there's just monitors everywhere, there's racks of equipment everywhere you look, and that is very astonishing to a lot of people, particularly those who are not in the video production world. And then the third one, for people who are a little more knowledgeable, is they're surprised that I'm able to power all of the electronics in the trailer with just a single 110 volt 15 amp circuit. Now that is actually by design. When I was building the trailer, I not only had my monetary budget, I had a separate spreadsheet where I was keeping track of the power draw of all the pieces of equipment that I was going to be buying and installing, and I was trying to keep that under the 15 amp draw that I would have available when plug into electrical circuits at most venues. So anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about the U.S. electrical system, and then this conversation will make a little bit more sense. So here in the U.S., with residential and commercial, the power coming into a building is actually 240, 250 volts. And I know we're known throughout the world for having 110, 120 volt circuits, and that is true with the outlets, but the power coming into the facility is actually 240 volts. Now, what happens is that power is split into two separate legs. It's split evenly, so you get two legs that are 110 to 120 volts each, and those are the circuits that are distributed throughout the building. Most of the outlets that we have here in the US, the most common ones you're going to find are 15 amp, and then there are a handful of 20 amps, but most of the circuits that those come from the circuit breaker are actually 20 amp circuits. So in order to make this trailer work at a standard facility that doesn't have special power, was I needed to be able to make it run off of 15 amp circuits, because that's going to be the limit on most receptacles. Even though the circuit powering it can probably deliver 20, the receptacles themselves are only rated for 15. So you really don't want to exceed that limit. You might get yourself into a situation where you're drawing too much power and causing things to overheat. So anyway, the design goal for the trailer was to make sure that it was going to be able to be powered, the electronic side was going to be able to be powered with 15 amps or less at 110 to 120 volts. So in order for the trailer to work at most facilities, I needed to be able to keep the power requirements under 15 amps per circuit. I could do two circuits, one for the air conditioner, one for the electronics, but I needed to keep each of those circuits under 15 amps, and so that was the design goal for the trailer. So as I was designing the trailer, I designed it such that all the electronics inside of it could run on a single 15 amp circuit. The air conditioner is kept separate, and there's no way I could run the air conditioner and the electronics on the same circuit. That's just too much power. But I needed to be able to plug it in at any facility that I might be working in, even those that are not equipped to handle a video production system you might find in a bigger trailer. So as I was designing, I had a spreadsheet keeping track of not only what the equipment cost, but how much power it drew. And so as I was selecting the components that I was going to be using, that way I could make sure that my power draw was going to be kept under that 15 amps total. So the connections into the trailer are actually done with locking twist connectors. This is what they call an L530, and the connector just gets inserted in there, so push the insert and then a slight twist, and then that locks it in place. So the trailer has two of these. They're called L530, which means it's capable of handling up to 30 amps. So even though I kept the trailer power draw under 15 amps per circuit, I wanted to make sure that none of the connectors was going to be a problem, particularly for the air conditioning circuit, because as the air conditioner is starting up, it actually draws quite a bit more than the 15 amps that the circuit is rated for. Fortunately, it doesn't do it for very long, so it doesn't trip the breaker, but the power draw initially, as the compressor is coming on, is significantly more than that 15 amps. Fortunately, it does work fine on 15 amp circuits, and so that hasn't been a problem. Bigger production trailers, the ones that are larger than mine, are typically powered by higher power circuits, so 30, 40, 50 amp circuits that are kind of the standard for a lot of those. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to limit myself to the venues where that's available. In fact, I may not have ever even worked at a venue where that kind of power was available, so we've had to settle for making sure that we can run on 15 amp circuits. So that said, I'm going to talk about how we actually get power to the trailer in situations where a venue either doesn't have dedicated circuits or we have to run it too far. So there are limits on how far you can run power. Like the longer you run a power cable, the more loss you have, and it's much easier to trip a breaker on a long cable than it is on a shorter cable. So within the trailer, I carry a whole pile of these. These are 10 gauge, 110 volt power cables, and I've never had any trouble powering the trailer with up to 2 of these. These are 100 feet long. I've never had a problem powering the trailer with up to 2 of these connected in series. However, I would never want to go any farther than that. So if I'm in a situation where I need power and it's not available within that kind of distance, then I have to turn to another solution, such as a generator. Now, we have a number of locations that we've worked that are away from power, and so it's just kind of standard practice to bring in a generator. And when they do, they very often bring in a generator that looks kind of like this. It's a mobile pull-behind generator, and these things, 8,000 watts and up. Most typically you find 25 or 30,000 watts is a lot of the venues that we're working with. And even though these do have 110 volt circuits on them, they're very often limited to just 1 or 2 of those. And most of the time when we're doing these sort of events, we're not the only ones who need power, so we can't take up all of the different outlets that are there. Now, the mobile generators will very often have a 50 amp 250 volt output on them, and for that we need to use a cable like this. And you see what that connector looks like. So the output on the generator will look like this. This is a twist connector, and it has 2 hot connections. Each of those is actually 110 volts. Then it has a neutral, and then it has a ground. Well, it's 250 volts, so we have to split it in order to make it work for 110 volt circuits. So how do we do that? Well, I've got my own power distribution box that I built. So this is the power distribution box that I built in order to power not only my trailer, but anything else that needs powering on location. Now, if you look at the top of this, it actually has that 50 amp 250 volt connector on it. And so I can take that big massive cable and plug it right in. So the same connector that they have on the generator, I actually have on my box here. So push that in and then twist, and then plug the other end into the big generator, and then I've essentially got power that I can use for my trailer. The breakers on here, these 2 are actually for the power input, so I flip those on once the generator's been connected, and then I have circuits A and B here. Each of these is 20 amps, and those come to these 2 outlets down here, and those are what I use to power the trailer. I also have a 50 amp output that I can use for other things if I need to. Haven't had to use that yet, but it's there just in case. So another option that we have is plugging into outlets in a facility that are normally used for other things. So say maybe an electric range in a kitchen, or a dryer in a laundry room. Those are typically 240 volt outputs, and very often 40, 50 amps, 30, 40, 50 amps. So I've got a whole series of connectors, cables like this. Like this one in particular that's a 40 amp connector, 240 volts, and then that adapts to the same connector that goes into this box. And I can either run it directly into this box or plug it into that big cable that I showed you a moment ago, and then run the big cable out to the trailer, and then have that big cable go into the box to be able to power things as well. Let me show you some of the other cables that I've got. So this is a 50 amp, so 240 volt 50 amp, same kind of deal. And I've got one with bare wires, so just for those that are curious, the black and the red are the hot, white is the neutral, and then green is ground, and then it just goes to the same connector again. If I need to, I can actually cut the ends off and have bare wires there. And then I've got some that are for 250 volt circuits that don't have a ground. So like this one, this is a 30 amp 250 volt 240 volt. This is an older style that you commonly find with like older homes that have electric dryers. So you can plug in, get enough current there, and then that adapts it to the 240 volt connector here. Now I know this seems kind of dangerous because there's only 3 connections, and I have 4 on the output. And what's going on here is the neutral and the ground are internally bonded in here, and that allows me to use the circuit. So when you only have 3 connections like this in a facility, in a home, business, whatever, these 2 are hot, and then this one's in neutral. There is no ground. There's no safety ground on those, and so it's a little more potentially a little more dangerous, but you still get the power that you need. And I have actually used this one quite a few times. There's a church that I do events at, and they don't have high amperage outputs anywhere except the kitchen, so I'll run this cable into the kitchen. And then I have another one that's similar for 40 amp. So this is a 240 volt 40 amp there, very similar as well. And in addition to that, I carry some other adapters as well. So you have a portable generator that does 250 volts. They'll very often have this locking connector. And then on the other end, I've got your standard 50 amp output receptacle, and I'll just use that with one of those cables that I showed you in order to get power into the box. And then similarly, this one's a little bit different. This one's actually 110 volt 30 amp connector. This one does have a ground, so one of these is the neutral, the other is hot, and then the single hot here goes to the 2 hots that are here. But that does provide the power that I need. So it's not really coming in at 240 volts at that point. It's coming in at 120. But it does provide the 30 amps that I would need to run the box and therefore the trailer. And then here's another adapter for a generator that does a single 110 or 120 30 amp output. Got an adapter here to convert 50 amp to the 30 amp style. 30 amp. This one's useful for the air conditioner, because the air conditioner connector is actually 30 amp. And then if I ever need to adapt the output of my big cable to a standard 50 amp connector, I've got this cable as well. So bottom line is there might be situations where I need to use multiple of these in order to convert power from a facility to the power that I need. But I have the right combination of devices and right combination of cables in order to make that happen. When we run into a situation where there's just not going to be any way to get power from a venue, our only other option at that point is to run a generator. And I actually have 3 generators of my own. I'll show you the 2 that I use most commonly. So this is the first one that I got. This is a Generac IQ 2000. This one's rated at 1600 watts continuous, 2000 peak. And it's a little portable guy. It's only about 47 pounds, so it's something you can actually carry around without too much difficulty. And this one is big enough to run all the electronics in the trailer. And I've done that on a few occasions, and it works just fine for that. This is what they call an inverter generator. And these are very quiet. You probably heard some of the big loud, what they call open frame generators, where you can actually see the motor and everything. You can see this one's fully enclosed. So because the motor is fully enclosed in that housing, it tends to be very quiet. And then it uses an inverter, much like my trailer has an inverter to run power off of batteries, in order to generate the AC power that will actually run the trailer or whatever other device you happen to plug into it. And having the inverter means you get very, very clean power that looks just like the power coming out of your wall in your home. It's safe to run electronics, whereas some of the bigger open frame generators that are not inverter style won't be as safe, and they'll produce dirtier power and won't necessarily be great for your electronics. With so much electronics in the trailer, I'm basically going to be insisting on inverter generators whenever I possibly can. Only use the other style if I have no other choice whatsoever. So this one is able to power the electronics, and then I just recently acquired its bigger brother. This is a Generac IQ 3500. This one provides 3000 watts continuous, 3500 in peaks, and this one is big enough to run the air conditioner. So between the two generators, I'm able to power the entire trailer, and I'm able to do so without much noise and without consuming a whole lot of gasoline. These both run very efficiently. So you can run about 5 hours at the load that my trailer actually requires on a tank of fuel. So fill up once during the middle of the day and be able to continuously run for basically an entire work day. So these, like I say, these are very, very quiet. I'm able to hold a conversation on the phone while I'm standing right next to one, and the person on the other end doesn't even notice that there's anything going on. This 3500 is, even though it's not twice the power of the smaller 2000, it's more than twice the weight. So this one weighs about 110 pounds without fuel, and then it holds, I think it's 3 gallons of fuel. That adds in about another 25 pounds to it. So this can become a little bit unwieldy for a single person to move around, particularly because it doesn't have wheels on it. So I have a cart that I use to move this around, and that works pretty well. But anyway, so the combination of the 2 Generacs, what I own, are enough to run the trailer. And I like having 2 separate ones. That gives me some options. So if I was running one big one and it happened to die, I would be dead in the water. I wouldn't be able to do anything. I wouldn't be able to continue to function. But with 2, if either one of them dies, I can have the one remaining one run all the electronics, and then I can figure out some other solution to keep the equipment cool. So whether that be running a fan or making sure that the doors are left wide open, whatever. I have options available to me at that point. But if I only have one generator and it decides to quit working, I may be in real trouble. Now the 3rd generator I've never actually used for an event. It's a 5,000 watt, what they call open frame. It's loud, it's smelly, it's heavy, it's awkward. So it's not ideal. It's there in a pinch if I ever happen to need it. But for the most part, I'm going to try and stick to the 2 Generacs that I have. They're quiet, efficient, small enough that I can actually move them around by myself without additional help. So that's about it for power coming to the trailer. I'll do another video at some point where I talk about how I've got the power systems in the trailer already wired, but in honesty I've actually already covered that here on the channel. The very first video that I did about constructing the trailer, that's where I covered the power systems, and things haven't changed too much since then. I did replace the inverter charger in the trailer at one point. I do have another video on the channel about that. That was almost exactly a year ago from the time I'm shooting this video. That was about February of 2020, where my friend Paul and I replaced my previous inverter and charger with a single unit. It's made by Xantrex. And so there it is. I had the Freedom XC2000 that is able to power the trailer off of battery when other power options are not available. And that has worked phenomenally well. I've been so super happy with that. I'm very glad that I've got that, and that has saved my rear end on a number of occasions when somebody decides to unplug the trailer, or we trip a breaker at a facility or whatever. So anyway, if you guys have questions about this, please leave those in the comment section down below. I'll try and answer those as best I can. If you're new to the channel and are interested in video production related content, please consider subscribing. I try and do videos about once a week here on the channel. If you want to get a little more involved with the discussion about the things we're talking about, please join us on Discord. There's a link down there at the bottom of your screen to join us on the Discord server, where we talk about all things related to video and audio production. I've got a great community there that's anxious to answer questions for people who are just learning and starting out. So if you're also in the video production industry and would like a tool to help you manage your business, I've created a website called crewaxis.com, CREWAXIS, and there are plans available for free. You can see and try it out and see if you like it, see if it's going to work for you. But that site will help you keep track of your events, your crew, your equipment, keep track of your finances, do your invoicing, quotations. It does pretty much everything that you might need a site to do for running a video production related business. One other thing that I should mention is that these days I record behind the scenes for not only the events that we shoot, but also for the making of these videos that I place here on the channel. If you want to be able to see that, click on the join button down below the video. So we've got paid memberships here on the channel, and you get early access to videos without advertising. You get to see behind the scenes for events, private videos nobody else gets to see, and a whole bunch of other things. So you can either join there or actually join us on Patreon with the link that's in the description for this video as well. So anyway, that's going to do it for now. So thanks everyone for watching, and have a great day.